Thanks very much, everybody. Good to see you again. I was working out, this is the fourth, I think, in this series of updates from the City of Edinburgh Council. So that means a month has gone by. I can't believe how quickly time is passing in lockdown. It's quite extraordinary. But delighted that we've got Adam McVey, leader of the Edinburgh City Council, with us today. Really interesting. I'm sure you're going to cover it, Adam, but really interesting seeing the recent claimant figures coming out. Well, not interesting. I mean, quite disturbing. Looking at the claimant figures, up 192% for Edinburgh. So when we look at sort of June last year to this year, last year claimant figures were 6,105. This year, 17,850. So that is a massive jump, and significantly higher than Scottish average. So suspect that's got a lot to do with our kind of reliance on hospitality and tourism. So I'm sure a lot of those jobs will be in that sector. But I'll sure you pick that up amongst other things, Adam. Hopefully we'll have some time for some questions afterwards. But I'm just going to hand over straight to you because I'm sure there's lots to say, and we'll pick up some of those points later. Anyway, thanks for joining us. Over to you, Adam.
No problem. So the claimant count, I mean, it's a drastic change, and I think the thing that should strike all of us is that isn't the full effect yet. When the furlough scheme ends later in the year, or is expected to end later in the year, we would expect more businesses to make decisions about what they can and can't do and what they can and can't afford going forward. It's also worth saying just now, even though I think we're in a good position in that a lot of businesses are reopening, I think it's fair to say it's been a relatively slow start in that sector. A lot of businesses are still operating under their previous arrangements, if they were operating at all, are still gearing up towards opening. And in the next kind of week or 2 weeks, I think we're going to see pretty much universal reopening, where reopening is going to happen across the city, which is a positive thing. I've actually just this morning written a piece for the Evening News that should be in tomorrow on business confidence, and underline that actually there is quite a lot of positivity to take from the businesses that are reopening, their new practices, they're embracing the new solutions, some of the macro stuff as well, some of the bigger projects that aren't missing a beat and are still pretty much on course. I'm thinking of things like BioQuarter, but there's still an enormous amount of challenge there, and I suppose, you know, I'll be doing my part in the next couple of weeks to make sure that people understand that while people might be a bit nervous about going into a shop, going into a cafe, you know, to get a coffee that they would normally have got pre-COVID and pre-lockdown restrictions, that it's important to keep that spend up. It's important to support those local businesses, because if we don't, as customers right across the city, then there's no one else that's going to step into that void. So if we want to see these local businesses continue, you know, I'll be hitting that message that really it's up to us as locals living here, relying on those restaurants, relying on those cafes and shops for the services that we want and need. Since I last spoke, there's been a couple of things that have happened that have been quite positive. The eTag campaign got council endorsement, I think a few days after I'd spoken to this forum. And that's a positive campaign that will be launched in a week's time, which will drive up and try to drive up a lot of support for people, from people for business right across the city, and try and get a real sense of everybody pulling for the sector, the businesses that we need to, in order to keep those claimant count figures as low as we possibly can, to weather the storm as best as we can. And there's other things that the council's trying to do to supplement and complement that. We're applying for £188,000 worth of support from the Scottish Government for their scheme for town centres and bid districts. That's for things like floral planters, to try and make areas more attractive. It's to try and sign up to a kind of it is on model of discount for people supporting those local businesses, which I think has worked pretty well in Constitution Street during the tram works to try and drive up business and keep that local loyalty and footfall going during that disruption. And also things like cargo bikes so that people can apply for deliveries and get deliveries and get turnover protected as much as it can be within businesses and in a green and sustainable way. About 10,000, I think, businesses have now registered for the Ready, Set, Go thing and have kind of went through that process and have either changed or made sure that they're compliant with the guidance and regulations, and that I think has helped. One, it's helped those businesses open with confidence, but two, I hope what it does is give people right across the city, when they're looking at services, when they're looking at the decision of whether they go out for dinner or whether they stay in or whether they, you know, go into the cafe that they normally go to and get a coffee or not, or whatever it is, that gives people a lot more confidence in using those services again, because the council's worked really hard, 20,000 businesses engaged with for guidance through this process, thousands of businesses directly spoken to by the teams to try and really support as much activity as we possibly can. And I think it's hopefully paying dividends. I've been certainly out in the last couple of days and last week sampling some of what Leith has to offer, and actually what I think we're seeing as businesses that have really taken it seriously, embraced it, and really thought about their own premises and how they maximise revenue, but how they keep the kind of public's expectation of safety within that. And there's going to be examples that differ from that, but actually broadly in the whole scheme of things, I think it's been hugely positive. In terms of other things the council's doing, the town centre programme for Places for People has just been announced and should be taken forward in the next week around places like Morningside, Carstorphine, Portobello, Stockbridge, Leith and Great Junction Street. Different range of options from expanded public realm in pavements to pop-up cycleways to other measures to try and make sure that people again feel comfortable in that space, because I don't think we can underestimate the starting point that people are going to have in wanting to go and shop in their local area. And as much as we've seen, you know, queues down the block for the hairdressers, and it's good I've turned my camera off, so you can't point out as a collective how much I'm probably need to join one of those queues. But there's still a need for us to underline again and again the actions that are being taken to make it easier, make it safer, and encourage people into those spaces and spend their money to support those local town centres. And that's as much about the city centre as it is those town centres right across the city. And I hope and I think that will build a lot of confidence when we do that again, not just with consumers but businesses themselves. I think that needs everybody to lean into it. It needs everyone to understand what the starting point is. We've seen some concern about some of those actions, and some of that's understandable because some of it is fairly substantial change, although there's been a lot of progress to work on those proposals. I'm thinking of Stockbridge in particular to try and take on board those concerns. But that really needs business to lean into those changes and understand where we're coming from as a council in supporting businesses and supporting people to use that space, which is ultimately going to keep footfall high and keep business spend high. If we don't take those actions, if we say it's business as usual, if we say we're going to try and get back to just the same model of operating that we were in early to mid-March, I think our recovery and our building back better approach is going to be significantly delayed, because it will not meet the public's expectations. And while a whole number of people have expectations in the city that everything should just go back to normal as quickly as possible, we can't ignore the absolutely significant number of people who will respond to that public health message and expect those measures to be taken to facilitate their feeling of safety and security within that context. So I think at a city level, the campaign that will be launched by ETAG in a week's time, I think will help hammer home that message in a local yet macro sense to the city as a whole, and that will be very much amplified and complemented by Visit Scotland's own messages at a national level, supporting business right across the country, but with quite a lot of Edinburgh-specific messages, both to the domestic market in Edinburgh, Lothians, Scotland, and also further afield. But also, I think some of those on the ground communications and actions, I think, is going to feed right up that tree and meet people's expectations so that people know what to expect. Some of the things that obviously drive people into the city centre, things like our museums and other kind of experiences, are going to look and feel different. We're already seeing a whole host of things that have reopened requiring bookings, pre-bookings before attending, whereas before you would have had walk-ins and nobody would have even thought to have booked to go and visit a museum or whatever in the city centre. So those expectations among people is going to have to change quite a bit. And I think we have a responsibility as a council, but certainly we have a responsibility, I think, as a collective, including the business community, to make sure that people are not kind of being caught off the hop with that people understand what the expectations of them are. And some of that messaging at a citywide level is going to be about that plan ahead thing, because people are going to have to plan ahead and do what they want to do in a way that they've never done before. Trying to find somewhere for dinner on Wednesday night, which was the first night that I could have went anywhere for dinner, required more planning than I have ever put into going out for dinner ever before in my entire life, because to find somewhere that was open and local and that I wanted to go to was near impossible. But I did find somewhere, and the experience was lovely. But that kind of filter is something that people are not going to be used to, and certainly we'll try from that citywide approach to enable as much activity, as much footfall, as much spend as possible in businesses and help everybody through it. But that message is going to have to be echoed and amplified amongst us all, because there's no point the places around the museums that know they are relying on those experiences for their footfall being totally oblivious to the fact that their customers and those who are visiting those attractions will be required to do things that they weren't having to do before. So it's in all our interests to echo and amplify those messages to make sure that people's expectations are being met and adjusted for the new climate. Just to go back to, I'll kind of end where I started in terms of the claimant count, and then I'm more than happy to take any questions. In terms of our approach in Edinburgh to how we go forward, it's going to be important to, I think, change the way we look at what we're experiencing in terms of the employment market, and particularly in terms of skills. We are still seeing parts of the economy that are, I don't know if we're quite on a growing cusp, but certainly are not missing a beat, are still developing, still creating opportunities. Even though there's a huge amount of uncertainty in a whole host of areas in the economy, and that shouldn't be underestimated. One of the things that we are trying to do is pull together the skills agencies, the education agencies, and institutions, and indeed the private sector, to try and say, well, how do we ensure that 17,000 people who are currently claiming an employment benefit are not a generation lost? And that's a very intergenerational generation. But how do we ensure people, regardless of where they are in age and point in their career, still have the opportunity to come out of that and rebuild into a sector they might not have thought about working in before, or they might have always wanted to work in before, and rebuilding skills and training and opportunities and employment into that circumstance. And I think getting the entire city on board with that approach, which I think will be a relatively easy task in terms of the education institutions and the skills agencies, and utilising everything we have at our disposal, including the City deal, which with its skills component, utilising everything we have as a city to channel people who have maybe found themselves falling out of one career because of the circumstance we find ourselves, and find themselves with an opportunity rather than with no opportunity. So that's the approach we're very much hoping to bring forward. It's going to require an incredible amount of collaboration, including with the private sector, obviously, to try and steer people into those opportunities and rebuild as quickly as we can. And that approach, I think, is going to stand us in far better stead in the short, medium and long term, and is just so different to how we all collectively had to change or react in 2008 when we had the financial crash. So I think we've learned from that experience, learned lessons, and hopefully we leave a better legacy for the future out of this, and don't give up things like the drive for fair work. You know, keep accelerating it and keep building on it. More than happy to take questions.
Brilliant, thanks very much, Adam. Yeah, tough times. I mean, I've got a couple of questions, but I don't know how to hog it. Can I just ask one at the beginning, though? One thing we're finding is because of this work from home culture, we've got a lot of businesses are saying that they are just not able to reopen because, particularly sort of the local cafes and restaurants, they just don't have the footfall. So, you know, obviously this is going to be a major challenge for the city centre, where people are now feeling that they can work from home. Have you guys got any modelling or any forecasting of how the city centre footfall is going to increase, so that businesses can plan how they reopen? Are you sort of capturing footfall and linking into any UK modelling that shows how this might unfold?
So I don't have projective modelling, and I don't think we have that. Certainly from the council, we've surveyed, to use just one example, though we're a pretty big example, we've surveyed our staff, and a huge proportion are happy to work from home. Yeah, so I suppose working from home, if you have a £17,000 call handler in an organisation who can work from home, save £2,000 a year worth of train fares, and the business doesn't have to then accommodate the space for that person to work in their office, and it meets the public health or any potential public health requirements going forward, I suppose you can see why that's an attractive proposition. Edinburgh, I suspect, will have a lot of people in roles that can work from home. We don't have, as far as I'm aware, any projective modelling as to where that goes, but I don't know if you caught me saying that the council surveyed our 18,000 workers and exploring those who could work from home, that are obviously not teachers working in the classroom or something like that, but for those that could work from home, what would the appetite be? And a fairly substantial proportion have come back and said they would be happy and willing to do that for family childcare reasons, for whatever else. So it is difficult, and there was the Google Analytics that I'm sure a lot of people would have seen in the last week or two on highlighting Edinburgh's relatively low activity rate, and that referred to activity, i.e. from someone's house to workplace. And Edinburgh may have a lot of opportunities within its industries for people to continue that working practice. I suppose my response to that would be twofold. One, it's going to be important to get the local market on board more than ever. So whether that is people using their local town centres and supporting those businesses rather than the place that would have been across from the place that they worked before, I think that's going to be absolutely crucial to build the full picture. So while Mr. Smith might work from home, looking after the kids, whatever, and use the coffee place in Leith as opposed to city centre, as long as the macro picture remains the same, there's still an opportunity for a bit of transfer, there's still an opportunity for us all to kind of support that still vibrant ecosystem, which is the thing that I think so many of us relied on, because it's that ecosystem that brings people not just from Leith into the city centre, but brings people from Dalkeith into Edinburgh, brings people from Glasgow into Edinburgh, London into Edinburgh. So it's that ecosystem that I think is most important. It's going to be less important, I think, for us to try and, you know, stand like King Canute trying to hold back the tide of people working from home, because I don't think that's going to be an effective plan. I think far more effective is to try and make sure that that citywide message is still encouraging people to use what we've got, whether it's in the local town centre, at the end of their street, or in the city centre. And that's what we'll kind of focus on. I mean, whether the coffee shop across from the workplace is going to be the deciding factor to whether someone goes back to work or not is probably dependent on the strength of the coffee.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Does anybody else want to come in with any questions? Oh, Andrew Morris, how are you doing there?
Yeah, fine, thank you. And hi, Liz and Adam. And this is actually unusually for me, not a procurement question. So it's a question about jobs. Very interested to see that the Chancellor spoke in his statement about the Kickstart scheme, where jobs would actually be funded for young people aged 16 to 24 that were currently out of work. He was going to fund a scheme for, you know, paying their wages for 6 months. Now, that's very interesting to us. We can take on people anywhere within the UK. I'm not clear what the scheme for Scotland is, and I would like to know very soon, because if I don't, I'll employ somebody down in London or anywhere. We can do that, but I would rather employ within Edinburgh if possible.
Thanks. Really good point. I'm not sure what the nature of the scheme that's been developed yet in Scotland. I can check that out and see what details I can get, and I'm more than happy to send them on to you, Andrew. I do know that when the government announced the start of their scheme, it's kind of important to note, I suppose, that both schemes at both respective national levels are focused on young people, and the Edinburgh scheme, and we've had the Edinburgh Guarantee now for a long time. Our scheme is aiming to kind of build on those principles, but right across age groups, because I think we recognise that there's going to be people right across industries, right across ages that they're in, you know, the same situation. But it is important to get that starting point right for young people. More than happy to check it out in terms of the Scotland scheme. I know that, for instance, the Edinburgh Guarantee was mentioned in the announcement of the Scottish scheme. So to what extent it's a cash incentive for payment of salaries and stuff like that, or whether it's more akin to the Edinburgh Guarantee scheme that's more about getting employers to sign up to those principles and that approach, I'm not sure of. I'm more than happy to check out.
Yeah, because I was going to say, because obviously getting a salary funded for 6 months and us being able to give a training experience and hopefully keep the person on is hugely attractive to us.
I think that's a really good point, Andrew. And I know Sandy Begbie, who's formerly with Standard Life as Chief People Officer, I think, at Standard Life, and he was chair of the Developing the Young Workforce for this region. He's been appointed by Scottish Government to chair this particular project. So we can reach out and see what thoughts Sandy's got, and even potentially get Sandy to come and have a chat on one of our webinars to see what his thinking is and how we can all feed in ideas. I notice it's just turned 10 o'clock. I don't know whether anybody else wants to have a quick question. Oh, Fiona? Yeah, one. Squeeze a quick question in.
It's not so much a question, but just a really quick point that Adam's talking about collaboration between education and business to sort out the skills gap. And it strikes me that's what we're trying to do on the Inspiring Talent team for the Chamber of Commerce, and we have that. Now, we've kind of been knocked on the head completely because this time last year we were talking about all the opportunities were in retail and tourism. And now that's completely been knocked on the head, and we've gone from hardly any people actually claiming, making claims, to the 192% increase. So it strikes me that maybe it would be an opportunity for us to collaborate with the council because we've been working in this area for a little while already.
I think that's a really good point, Fiona. And I know Joanne, head of our director of policy, will be linking in. But the Inspiring Talent Group has done some phenomenal work, and I know there was a really good conference beginning of this year. But you're right. I think that's where the opportunities had been identified, and I guess Adam, these projects like Edinburgh Guarantee, they are brilliant. But at the same time, it's about maintaining businesses and keeping businesses open that are ultimately going to create the jobs. So, I suppose what we continue to need is support from government in terms of keeping businesses open, because once the furlough scheme finishes in October, we are going to see a rash of job losses because businesses just won't be able to continue. So I think we need to continue to lobby for support to keep businesses open at all costs, because that will maintain jobs. But thanks very much for making that point, Fiona. Hey, thanks very much for joining us. I hope you're finding these useful, and we'll have another one next Monday. But we've got a variety of other webinars throughout the month. So please check our website and join us. Okay, have a great week. Thanks very much, guys. Bye.